Now calling to order the case of Jordan Street versus Reese Taylor, case number 18CV00120. Now ready to proceed with a pretrial. Plaintiff.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Sarah Papantonio, and together with my co-counsel, Claire Washburn, we have the pleasure of representing the plaintiff in this case. This is Jordan Street. Now, prior to proceeding with opening statements, the plaintiff has a few preliminary matters to take up with the court if you're ready for those now. Now, Your Honor, I understand that we're operating in a virtual world. This is a little bit new for all of us. And that with this type of innovation, there might be at times where the video lags, like we've already seen before. You know, someone might be on mute, someone might not hear something. So at any time in today's trial, if you feel like I'm lagging or there's a delay, I offer the court to raise their right hand just for a few seconds to notify me that you might have missed something. And Your Honor, I believe you're muted right now. I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Okay. I'll just buzz in if I need you to repeat something, okay?
Okay, of course. In addition to that, Your Honor, in a typical courtroom setting, we know that we'd typically be approaching the bench with objections. Now, in the virtual world, it's not really possible. But however, we do ask that we make objections constructively and outside the presence of the witness.
Sure.
And then with that, we are ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Give me 1 sec. Okay. Whenever you are ready, Ms. Rebecca, for your 5 minutes.
Yes, Your Honor. Rebecca Garcia, representing the defendant, Reese Taylor, in this case. Your Honor, just one quick housekeeping matter as well. Because we are in a virtual world and all of our rooms are a little bit different, for the purposes of making objections, is it okay with Your Honor if we make our objections while we're still sitting down? That way it's a little bit easier to hit the mute button.
Of course.
Okay, and Your Honor, me and co-counsel have stipulated to a couple matters that I just want to go ahead and put on the record. We have stipulated that there will be no mention of any subsequent remedial measure of a tent that was constructed on the field at Waco High School.
Okay.
And we have stipulated that there will be no mention of a prior incident between Coach Taylor and a student prior to him becoming coach at Waco High School.
Okay.
And with that, we are also ready to proceed.
All right. Give me 2 seconds to get the timer set up. Okay. All right, 55 minutes on the clock. I'll announce how much time you have left after each speech. Once you hit 10 minutes and below, I'll give you the following hand signals: 10, 9, so forth and so on. Once you get down to a minute, I'll give you a minute, then a half minute, and then I'll tell you to stop, okay?
Yes,
so
Your Honor.
We're ready to begin.
Prior to our opening statement, we'd just like to put the court on notice that we do intend to publish Exhibit 2, which is a picture of the victim in this case, to the jury.
That's fine, and you don't need to ask me permission to publish if something's admitted, okay?
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court, counsel. Your Honor, the child is dead. A mother has lost her daughter. You see, instead of writing words of congratulations on social media, this mother is writing her daughter's obituary. Instead of proudly cheering her daughter across the graduation stage, this mother cries as the pallbearers carry her casket away. Where a mother would be used to saying goodbye to her child as she goes off to college for the first time, this mother has to say goodbye to her child as they lower her 6 feet into the ground. And the worst part about this all is that it didn't have to happen. See, by the end of this trial, what the facts and what the testimony will tell you is that 3 things: the conditions, the contact, and the care are what led to Rory's death. The conditions Rory was practicing in, the contact the defendant was subjected her to, and the lack of care by the coach showed to a player. See, this is Rory Street. She's a great student, but not only that, she's a great athlete. She's Waco High varsity soccer star player with hopes and dreams to go on to be a Division I athlete and potentially even a pro athlete. See, the evidence is going to show that the defendant subjected this young woman to humiliation, forced her to endure a wave after wave of violent physical contact until Rory, she couldn't take it anymore. You'll hear that the defendant, the very person who was meant to protect her, stood in silence as that girl took her last breath. Now, in order to understand how and why this happened, we have to go back to September of 2018. See, today was just like any other day. Rory was headed to soccer practice. Just like we said, she was a talented player on her way to do big things. But like most people, she had good days at practice and she had bad days at practice. And today was tough. It was hot, not just Waco hot. It was 105 degrees. And she was missing some shots here and there. She was messing up some passes. It just wasn't a good day. And Coach Taylor, the defendant, well, he noticed. See, Coach Taylor on this day wasn't satisfied with Rory's performance. There were no bad days. So he starts yelling, tells Rory she's useless on this field, that she might as well just run until she passes out. We have to take a step back to talk about that. Because Reese Taylor, he's a grown man. And you're going to see that this grown man speaks to his children, speaks to children in this way. These are the people he's supposed to mentor. And you'll see that you'll see that to this defendant, Coach Taylor, that discipline, that teaching people lessons is more important than learning and growth. And today you'll see that Coach wants to teach Rory a lesson. So the defendant sends her on a run, and they call it the Burma Road, And the Burma Road is a punishment. What it is, it's where students sprint 30 yards, dribble a ball for another 30 yards, score on an open goal, and then get on their hands and knees and crawl 60 yards back to the starting point. 120 yards, only to do it all again. Add on to that 105-degree weather, no water breaks. Over and over and over again until Coach Taylor's appetite for punishment is satisfied. So you're going to hear about Burma Road a lot today. And when you do, I want you to understand that this defendant had kids crawling on their hands and their knees, sometimes by the length of a football field. And how does this affect Rory? The evidence will show it causes her body to shut down. She just can't take it. See, later today, you're going to see an expert report from Dr. Reagan McConaughey. This report will walk you through each of the many symptoms that Rory was feeling that day. Unusual paleness, chest tightening, heavy breathing, struggling, lifeless almost. These are all words used to describe Rory. And they were all signs that Rory was suffering a heat stroke. You're also going to see a toxicology report that shows a nominal amount of cocaine in Rory's system when she died. That's all you're going to see. That's all you're going to hear. In fact, an expert opinion in this case will tell you that that wasn't the result of Rory's death. The expert will tell you that the result of Rory's death was sheer heat exhaustion at the hands of Coach Taylor. And that's because the bear crawling, if I take you back to this date, the bear crawling wasn't the end of this discipline from Coach Taylor. To him, that wasn't enough. See, he needed more. And you'll hear that Rory never gets a break, never gets water, never gets the chance to catch her breath. Instead, the defendant has everyone on this team line up in a single file line, all of them facing Rory. And one by one, this defendant has the players slide tackling Rory. Now, slide tackling is exactly what it sounds like. It's tackling. You'll hear that this drill is physical, it's painful, that the purpose of it is to knock players to the ground and knock them down hard. But the defendant still isn't satisfied. See, after the first time Rory gets tackled down by one of her teammates, she struggles to get up. Struggles so hard to get up that the defendant actually grabs her by the jersey and rips her back into position. You'll hear that the next player approaches, knocks Rory off her feet. And 15 times, Rory is knocked to the ground over and over and over again. And each time, she gets back up until that last hit. See, that last hit, Rory just couldn't take it anymore. You'll hear that her body collapses. She starts convulsing. Her body trembles. She shakes until she suddenly becomes still. You'll hear that those are the moments that Rory took her last breath. All while the defendant, that man who was supposed to be watching her, protecting her, mentoring her, stood watching silently. The evidence will show that this defendant could have stopped this punishment, but chose not to. You'll see how he failed to see the signs, how he failed to see how Rory's physical health was declining with every hit. And now, as a plaintiff in today's case, it's our burden to show you this negligence. And we have to show you, based on a preponderance of the evidence, that the defendant failed to keep Rory safe during this practice, causing her to overexert herself and die. And we will absolutely meet that burden. Because throughout today's trial, think about the conditions that Rory was practicing in, the contact that this defendant subjected her to, and the lack of care that a coach showed for his players. And when you combine all of this evidence and all this testimony, we ask that you render a verdict and that you'll have no choice but to find this defendant liable, because he's liable for Rory's death. Thank you.
$46.32 remaining. All right, and I'm ready for your opening, Ms. Garcia, whenever you are.
Heat. It's used to mold and form some of the strongest materials on Earth. Here in Texas, the summer heat forges some of the finest athletes in the country, from the football gridiron to the baseball diamond to the soccer pitch and beyond. But the beating sun and radiating heat alone do not make good athletes. It takes fine coaching, motivators who are willing to help their athletes find their peak performance, sometimes adding some tough love when it's needed. Now, coaches like Reese Taylor push their players to make them better during those sweltering summer times. And none of it is a surprise. It's all expected, just as it was on September 7th, 2018. But today, you're going to see that one thing was different on that day. One thing that Coach Taylor could not control. You see, Rory Street, one of Coach Taylor's star soccer players at Waco High School, passed away at practice that day. But unknown to Coach Taylor or anyone else at practice, Rory Street had cocaine in her system. She had cocaine in her system when she showed up to practice that day. And you're going to see that her death was caused by that cocaine, not by anything Coach Taylor did. Now, Reese Taylor has been a coach for the past 26 years, coaching a little bit of everything, basketball to softball to track. He's coached soccer for about 20 seasons now. He's been the coach at Waco High School for 6. In those 6 years, he's led the Waco High School team to 5 district championships. He's led them to the regional finals twice, and he's even led them to the state semifinals. Coach Taylor pushes his players, but he does it because he wants them to reach their maximum potential. And he cares for each player as if the player was his own child. In fact, today you're going to see that his own daughter is on that same soccer team we're going to be talking about. His own daughter goes through these same practices, just like all of the other players. He always wants to make sure that he's moving forward when it comes to coaching practices and techniques as well. You're going to see that he attends coaching conferences all over the state of Texas, multiple times a year. Coach Taylor has had many talented players come through Waco High School, and Rory Street was one of those. You're going to hear a lot about Rory Street today. September 7th, 2018 started like any other day for Coach Taylor. Practice started around 3 or 3:15 like usual, and he was running a full scrimmage that day with all of the players. Now, during that scrimmage, he noticed that Rory wasn't exactly trying her hardest. She wasn't giving her full effort. He noticed that she missed a couple shots, missed a couple passes, generally wasn't in the right position throughout that scrimmage. But you'll hear that the most frustrating thing to Coach Taylor wasn't that Rory was missing parts of plays, but it was that she wasn't listening to his coaching. To try to get through to his star player, he decided to send Rory to run sprints on Burma Road. You're going to hear a lot about Burma Road today. It's like a tradition at Waco High School. Coach Taylor himself ran Burma Road when he was a student at Waco back in the 90s. It's a tool that he's adopted to motivate his athletes and discipline them, which is what he was doing with Rory that day. Running Burma Road meant that Rory needed to dribble a soccer ball, Rory needed to sprint 30 yards, then she needed to dribble a soccer ball another 30 yards, and then score on an open goal. After that, she had to go back the 60 yards on her hands and feet in a bear crawl. Now, this has been a common task for soccer players at Waco for generations. It was never something that seemed unreasonable, especially for athletes in peak physical condition. While Rory was running this Burma Road that day, Coach Taylor noticed that she still wasn't giving it her full effort. She was still slacking. He didn't want Rory to set a bad example for the team. So he called Rory back and he had her line up for a slide tackling drill. He saw no signs of heat exhaustion at that point. So he blew his whistle, and one at a time, the players lined up in the slide tackling drill to try to get the ball from Rory. He noticed that Rory was struggling. But once again, you'll hear that he saw no signs of heat exhaustion or any sign indicating that Rory needed medical attention. After the 14th or 15th time, Rory fell to the ground and she didn't get up. Through it all, Rory never said anything about feeling ill to Coach Taylor. Today, Your Honor, you're going to receive the toxicology report that was performed the day after Rory died. And that report's going to tell you that at 7:30 p.m. on September 8th, more than 24 hours after Rory died, she had cocaine in her system. You'll receive the expert report of Spencer London, and that report is going to tell you that Rory Street's death was caused by cocaine. You'll see that cocaine lowers the threshold of heat stroke because it inhibits the body's natural cooling process. And you'll see that many of Rory Street's symptoms on that day were consistent with someone who was using cocaine. Now, the plaintiff has the burden of proof in this case, but the defense has raised the affirmative defense of contributory negligence. So we must prove by a preponderance of the evidence that Rory Street had a duty to herself that day, to her own health, to protect her own health and safety. Second, we must prove that she breached that duty by not acting as a reasonable person would have in those same circumstances. And third, we need to prove that that breach proximately caused her own death. Now, the plaintiff's going to try to convince you that Coach Taylor bears the blame for all of this, that it was Burma Road and those slide tackles that caused Rory's death. But you'll see that another player that day ran Burma Road. And she had no heat exhaustion. She never fell over. She wasn't dehydrated. And we'll show you that Coach Taylor's decisions had nothing to do with Rory Street's untimely death, and that it was Rory choosing to ingest cocaine that ultimately caused her to die. And at the end of today's trial, after you've heard all of the evidence in this case, I will get back up here and ask that you return the only verdict that the evidence in this case supports, that Rory Street is fully responsible and fully liable for her own death. Thank you.
47-34 remaining. Okay, we'll be ready to begin with plaintiff's case in chief. Just give me 1 second. All right, plaintiff, ready to begin your case in chief whenever you are. 4632 remaining.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff calls Ms. Saracen to the stand.
Witness, Ms. Saracen.
Hello. Yes, I'm sorry. We switched computers, so trying to get this one situated.
This witness has been previously sworn. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Papantonia.
Good afternoon, Ms. Saracen.
Good afternoon.
Will you tell us about yourself? Where do you live?
I currently live here in Waco, Texas.
And what do you do for fun here in Waco?
I play soccer. I was on my high school soccer team.
How long have you been playing soccer?
I've been playing ever since I was little. I grew up playing soccer and played all the way through high school.
And did you continue playing into college?
Yes, I haven't started college yet, but I'm going to Rice University and I'm hoping to walk on to the soccer team there.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So now that we understand a little bit about yourself, I want to talk about Rory Street.
Okay.
Tell us about your relationship with Ms. Street.
Well, Rory's been my best friend since forever. I mean, we grew up together. We went to the same high school. We played soccer together our whole lives. We were best friends.
And you mentioned that you had known each other your whole lives and that you played soccer together. Describe Rory as a soccer player.
Oh my, she was the best person on our team by far. I think everyone would agree that she outplayed all of us.
As far as you know, what were Rory's plans for the future?
Rory was planning to go to college and play soccer as well.
You know, we got to go to this day. Excuse me. I need you to take us to the day that Rory Street passed away. Were you there?
Yes, I was there.
Okay, I want to take the judge through this in detail. So we're going to go point by point. What time did practice begin?
Practice began at 3:15 p.m. in the afternoon.
And we need to understand the conditions that you were playing with. Describe the weather.
It was scorching hot that day. It must have been, in at least the hundreds.
What were you doing at practice that day?
We started off with a scrimmage on the practice field, on our field. That's like in open sun, so it was really hot.
Before we go any further, tell us about your coach, Coach Taylor.
Coach Taylor, he's really tough. He can be really hard on us. He pretty frequently got angry with a lot of the kids. He really trained us really hard.
Is Coach Taylor the defendant in this case?
Yes, he is.
Okay. And what were you doing at practice that day?
We started just scrimmaging, just playing against each other.
Were you in that scrimmage?
I was.
And how did that progress?
I started playing and I wasn't doing really well. Coach just didn't like what I was doing, I guess. So he made me go and run Burma roads.
Okay, I want you to describe this Burma road to us.
Okay.
And as you describe it, first, Your Honor, permission to make use of a demonstrative.
Any objection, Ms. Garcia, to that?
If it's Exhibit 2, no, Your Honor.
No, Ms. Garcia. In fact, we're going to make a demonstrative outlining what Burma Road is by way of drawing it.
No objection. That's fine.
Go ahead.
Okay, Ms. Saracen, I want the judge to have an idea of what this Burma Road is. So what we're going to do is, can you describe this to us? And I'm going to have my co-counsel draw it out, and you're going to let us know if this is an accurate depiction.
Okay.
So what's the first thing you have to do on Burma Road?
Well, the first thing you do is, we start on basically the 60-yard line on the field. And for the first 30 yards going down towards the goal at the end of the field, you just sprint as hard as you can for that first 30 yards.
Let the record reflect that I'm indicating a 30-yard mark on this field, on this demonstrative. Okay, and once you've sprinted, what do you have to do next?
Next, there's a ball at the end of that 30-yard line, and you have to start kicking that ball and moving it forward for another 30 yards.
So we're sprinting and we're running for 30 yards, so that's 60 yards. Once you run 60 yards, what happens next?
Next, you have to shoot at that point at an open goal, meaning that there's no goalie there, and you just have to make the goal.
Okay, and then if you make the goal, what's your next activity?
The next thing you have to do is you have to get down on your hands and on your feet, and you have to bear crawl the whole way back, that whole 60 yards back to your starting point.
You're crawling back on your hands and knees 60 yards. You only do this once a practice?
No, you just keep doing it and doing it and doing it until coach somehow gets happy with how many times you've run it.
And what happens if you dribble wrong or you miss the goal?
Well, it makes coach mad and he'll just have to keep doing it until he's happy.
So how many times would you say had you done Burma Road on September 7th?
I think I'd been doing it for maybe 15 minutes total. So probably like 3 times the whole way through, I'd guess.
Okay, and Ms. Saracen, would you say that this is a fair and accurate depiction of the lengths at which you're running?
Yes.
Okay. Permission to preserve this, Your Honor. Okay, and I also want to look at where Burma Road is in relation to where practice was happening. So, Your Honor, permission to publish what's been pre-admitted as Exhibit 2.
Go ahead. And you don't need to ask me if it's been pre-admitted. Don't ask me. Just go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. And excuse me, I think I misspoke. I don't think it's it is Exhibit 2. My apologies. Okay. Okay, what are we looking at with Exhibit 2?
This is an aerial view of my high school soccer field.
And what is this area in red?
The red area is what we were just describing as the area of where you'd run the Burma Road.
And the area in blue?
That's our scrimmage, our practice field, where we do everything else.
Okay, so let's have the judge get a picture of where everyone was on September 7th. Now, you already indicated that you were doing Burma Road. Where was Rory?
Rory, when I first went over to do Burma Roads, she was still scrimmaging.
And where was the scrimmage area?
In the blue area. She was in the blue area.
And about how far would you say is the scrimmage area from Burma Road?
I would say from where I was in the Burma Road, it was probably about 20 yards.
Were you still able to hear what was happening during the scrimmage?
Yes.
Were you able to see interactions between Coach and Rory?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Washburn. We're complete with that. Okay, so now that we really have a layout of what was going on, I want to talk to you about the events that were occurring. While you were running Burma Road, what was happening with Rory?
Well, Rory, I guess, also was not making Coach very happy. I mean, sometimes, kids we have an off day at practice. It happens to all of us. But Rory was really getting it from Coach, I think, because, he expected her to do so good because she was the best player. But he just started hounding her and saying things like, just really, it was being really brutal towards her and saying you're missing shots that are wide open and you're not in position. And he was just being really hard on her. And so he eventually sent her over to run Burma Roads with me too.
And as far as you remember, between the time that the scrimmage was occurring and when he sent Rory over to Burma Road, had the team gotten a break?
No.
No water break?
No.
And you told us that it was 105 degrees. Is this typical for Waco?
Oh yeah, for September.
Okay. And so what did you observe when Rory came over to you in Burma Road?
As soon as she came over, I could tell something wasn't right. She just didn't look right. She was really pale, sweating and just breathing really heavy, and she didn't look right.
Did she ever indicate to you that she might not have been okay?
Yeah, I asked her, because I was concerned as her friend. I said, are you okay? And she said that she was having chest pains and just did not feel good. She didn't feel
Objection, Your Honor, as to relevance. May I be heard?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Your Honor, the witness has just testified as to what Rory said at that point in time, that she was feeling chest pain. But Your Honor, this isn't relevant to the issue in this case. The issue is whether or not Coach Taylor acted reasonably under those circumstances. Coach Taylor didn't hear what was said to Rory, to Ms. Saracen, and Ms. Saracen never conveyed this information to Coach Taylor. So none of this has anything to do with whether or not Coach Taylor was acting reasonable, because he didn't have this information.
Ms. Papantonio.
Your Honor, this is perhaps the most probative issue into today's case. It is absolutely relevant. Rory had just come from Coach Taylor's presence over to Miss Saracen. That means Coach Taylor had just witnessed Rory, had seen perhaps if she was struggling, and then sent her over to run more. In fact, the defense has brought on a case of comparative negligence. In fact, what they're saying is that there's an alternative cause to Rory's death. So this is directly relevant to disprove the fact that Rory potentially died from a cocaine problem rather than heat exhaustion. It goes directly to the elements of today's case.
Ms. Garcia, very briefly.
Yes, Your Honor. Again, I'm not objecting to the relevance of Miss Saracen's observations, simply to what Rory told Miss Saracen, because again, Coach Taylor wasn't able to hear that. So that isn't relevant to whether or not Coach Taylor was acting reasonably in this case.
I'm going to go ahead and overrule the objection. I think it's relevant to the overall factual scenario here. And so I think it's important that, everything that was happening, even if it was out of earshot, I think it has some degree, given how low the burden is for what is relevant under the federal rules, which we're operating under. I think that it's perfectly relevant. And so we'll overrule the objection. Thank you.
Now let me ask this question again. Did Rory ever indicate to you that she might not have been feeling well?
Yeah, I asked her, are you okay? And she told me that she was having chest pains and that she didn't feel all right.
Was this unusual for Rory?
Yeah, she never really looked like this. She was in great shape. It just was something out of the ordinary.
Was it something that concerned you?
It did concern me, yes.
Okay, and describe what was happening while Rory was struggling on Burma Road.
Well, Coach was watching because, he looks over when we're running those. And I guess he still wasn't satisfied with how Rory was running them with me beside her. And so he was yelling at her still. And just, you could tell he was super angry. And eventually he told her to come back on the field to run a different drill.
And what was that drill?
This was a new drill. It was something we'd never done before. I think he was just really trying to send a message for some reason to Rory. And he made us all line up on I wasn't there. I was still over running the Burma roads, but he made the team line up and do a slide tackling drill against Rory.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. And I really want to explain what a slide tackle is in soccer. Can you tell us that?
Yes, so it's when a player's moving forward on the field and they're trying to advance towards the goal. They're dribbling the ball, they're kicking the ball forward. This is when a defensive player comes in and tries to, they literally slide on the ground and they try to get the ball away from the offensive player by kicking the ball. And a lot of times it can be very physical and the player ends up on the ground. The offensive player that was dribbling the ball ends up on the ground.
Between the time that you and Rory were running this Burma Road drill and when Coach called her over to do this new drill, was there ever a water break?
No.
Was there ever an opportunity for Rory to rest?
No.
Okay, so I want you to take us back to this drill. Where were the players in relation to Rory?
The players were just lined up. I guess you could say on the field, it was probably at the 15-yard line and Rory was at the 0-yard line. And they would run directly at Rory as she was moving forward towards the middle of the field.
How many players were in this lineup?
There were 20 girls on our team, so there was 20 people in the lineup.
And as far as what you observed, where was the defendant, the coach, while all of this was occurring?
Oh, he was right next to Rory. He was on her side of the lineup.
Oh, I want you to take us to the moments that this drill began. What happened?
So Rory, she was moving forward. She was trying to make Coach happy and she kept trying to dribble and she kept getting tackled and tackled and tackled every time when someone would try to slide tackle her. So she ended up just falling onto the ground repeatedly. And it was really, honestly, it was super brutal to watch, my friend going through that.
And as Rory is falling to the ground, what is the defendant doing?
Well, he just kept yelling at her the whole time. And then one time she fell down really hard and it looked like she wasn't going to be able to get back up. It looked like her body, just gave out on her. And then Coach just came over to her and he just yanked her up by her jersey really roughly. and like held her up and just told her to keep running the drill. And so she tried to keep running the drill for him.
Now, at any point, did the defendant stop and say, okay, this is enough?
No,
At any point, did the defendant ask Rory if she was okay?
no,
At any point, based on what you observed, did the defendant show any concern for Rory's health that day?
no.
Okay, about how many times did the defendant allow Rory to be knocked to the ground?
I would say 15 times.
And what happened on that 15th time?
Rory never got back up again.
No further questions. Pass the witness.
You've got 32, 42 left. Let's see. 47. All right, Ms. Garcia, whenever you're ready.
Ms. Saracen, 2018 was your 4th year on the team at Waco High, right?
Yes,
And so you're familiar with the fields, like you just testified,
yes,
and you're familiar with Coach Taylor.
yes,
You're also familiar with the way that he runs practice generally,
yes,
and he was usually pretty tough.
yes,
Now, you were at practice on September 7th, 2018, correct?
yes,
So let's talk a little bit about that practice now. It started at 3:15, like you said, which was usual, right?
yes,
And Coach Taylor was running practice on the field that was adjacent to where you ran Burma Road, correct?
correct.
So he was running, Coach Taylor normally would run drills during practice, right?
Yes,
And if you goofed off or he thought you were slacking, he'd send you to Burma Road.
yes,
And so that day at practice, there was water available, right?
yes,
In fact, Coach Taylor always had water available, did he not?
yes,
And you could drink from those water bottles during breaks, right?
yes,
Typically, Coach would give you and the other players breaks in the middle of practice,
yes,
usually at least one.
yes, definitely.
Now, you just testified earlier that you didn't get any breaks that day, correct?
I believe I meant we only had one break. The only time we didn't have a water break was when after I went to the Burma Roads. After that, there was no water break.
But actually, you don't remember if you had any breaks that day, do you?
I believe I testified in my deposition that there was one break that day.
But you're not sure. Is it your testimony today that you testified in your deposition that you had one break?
That I believe that's what my deposition said. Yes.
Now, as you just said, you gave a deposition in this case, correct?
Yes.
You were there, obviously.
Yes.
I was there.
Yes.
And your attorney was there.
Yes.
There was a court reporter there.
Yes.
That court reporter took down everything I said
Yes.
and everything that you said.
Yes.
And you were under an oath that day,
Yes.
an oath to tell the truth.
Yes.
And that's the same oath that you constructively took today.
Yes.
Opposing counsel, turning your attention to Ms. Saracen's deposition, page 14, starting on line 4. And Ms. Saracen, do you have this deposition in front of you?
Yes, I did.
So, opposing counsel, once again, page 14. Ms. Saracen, at this deposition, you were asked, question, and how often did you take breaks? Answer, usually we took at least one break in the middle of practice after about an hour, but sometimes we took more or less. I don't remember how many we took that day, or if we took any. Did I read that correctly, Ms. Saracen?
Yes, you did.
So just to clarify, Ms. Saracen, you actually aren't sure how many breaks you took that day, right?
That's what I just said. Yes.
So whenever you did take breaks at practice, you usually just took them on the field
Yes.
because there weren't any trees or anything on the field.
Correct.
So no shade, right?
There was no shade.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about what you were actually doing at the practice now.
Okay.
You mentioned that there was a scrimmage going on that day, and you were part of that scrimmage
Yes, I was.
until you went to Run Burma Road.
Yes.
Run Burma Road, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
And at the earliest, this was around 4:30,
At the earliest, yes.
and that was and that was pretty far into practice, right?
An hour and a half about into practice.
And so while you were running, you heard Coach Taylor yell at Rory.
Yes.
That was on the practice field,
Yes.
and you were on Burma Road still.
Yes.
And that was pretty far away from where they were, right?
It was only about 20 yards.
So would you agree that 20 yards is pretty far away?
No.
Miss Saracen, once again, turning back to your deposition, counsel, turning your attention to page 6, line 20. Miss Saracen, do you have this in front of you?
Yes, I do.
So Miss Saracen, at this deposition, you were asked, what did you hear Coach Taylor yell at Rory? That was question. Answer. It was all about how Rory was playing sloppy, out of position, missing passes, not finishing wide open shots. I mean, I was pretty far away from where they were because Burma Road isn't right up on the practice field or anything. But it went on for a while. And then you go on. Miss Saracen, did I read that correctly?
Correction, Your Honor. Motion to strike for improper impeachment. May I be heard?
Yes, you may.
Your Honor, the question was 20 yards away is pretty far. That was what the question that she was confronted on. And the impeachment was as to the distance she was away from the practice field. It has nothing to do with the idea that 20 yards is far away. In fact, there's no yard length given to suggest this is just an improper impeachment. There's no parallel between what the impeachment is being made and the argument.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Sure.
Your Honor, the question directly before that was whether or not Miss Saracen was pretty far away from where this happened. She said she was not. She said she was only about 20 yards away. In her deposition, she said she was pretty far away. That is a direct contradiction.
Ms. Papantonio, briefly respond to that.
Yes, Your Honor. The question the witness was confronted with is you would agree 20 yards is pretty far away. That is the issue here that was trying to be impeached. That's not consistent with what the testimony we just heard was.
Okay. I'm going to sustain this objection, actually. I think that I agree. You asked a question about, 20 yards in a vacuum, if that's far away. I don't think that's necessarily inconsistent with her saying that she was pretty far away, in a different context. Also, to be frank, I don't really know what mileage either of you really get out of this, but I'm going to go ahead and, sustain the objection. Let's move on to something else other than the distinction of who was or wasn't pretty far away, if that's okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Now, Ms. Saracen, eventually at some point, Rory joined you on Burma Road, right?
Yes.
And you guys ran for a few minutes together.
Yes, we did.
And then you noticed that she was pale.
I noticed when she walked over that she was pale.
And after a few minutes, she wasn't feeling too well, right?
Right.
But you never said anything about this.
I never said anything to Coach, no.
You never said anything to the trainer that was there that day.
No.
And eventually, Rory went on to the slide tackling drill, correct?
Yes.
And this was still about 20 yards away from where you were.
Yes.
Now, you didn't hear Rory say anything to Coach about how she felt, right?
No.
She didn't say anything after the drill started
No.
or at any point during that drill, right?
No.
She just kept lining up and doing each round.
Yes.
Now, even before this incident, You weren't Coach Taylor's biggest fan, were you?
Not really, no.
You were the full-time starting midfielder your junior season.
That's correct.
But your senior year, that changed.
Yes.
You ended up having to share time with Coach Taylor's daughter.
Yes.
And that didn't make you happy.
No.
You were a little upset.
Yeah.
And as far as Rory, you knew that she was under a lot of pressure.
Yes.
From her parents, or her dad specifically.
Yes.
And she was under pressure to get a good scholarship.
Yes.
But you never heard or seen Rory use drugs, correct?
No, never.
As far as you know, if Rory had used anything, it would have been her first time.
Sorry, what'd you say?
As far as you know, if Rory had used any drugs, it would have been her first time.
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
39-35 left.
Ms. Harrison. Now, does your position?
Give me 1 second.
Oh,
Give
excuse me.
your clock. Okay.
Of course.
Thank you. 32-42 left. Go ahead.
Yes. Now, Ms. Harrison, does your relationship with Coach Taylor and your positioning on the field, did it have anything to do with your testimony here today?
Absolutely not.
Did the fact that you're no longer playing that position affect what you saw on the field that day?
No.
And Ms. Harrison, regardless of whether you were 40 feet away or 60 feet away, can you tell the judge that you accurately heard what Coach Taylor was saying to Rory?
Yes, he was yelling and sound travels.
Now, I want to briefly talk about the breaks because we talked a lot about whether or not you were given a water break. Now, between the time that the scrimmages were occurring and between the time the scrimmages were occurring and Coach Taylor sent Rory over to Burma Road, did Rory get a break?
No.
Did Rory get water?
No.
Between the time that Rory went from Burma Road to the slide tackling drill, did Rory get a break?
No.
Did Rory get water?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor. Pass the witness.
31-40 remaining. Anything further from this witness, Ms. Garcia?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. You should be excused, everybody. Can we excuse this witness?
Oh, yes, Your Honor. I apologize. Didn't hear you.
Good deal. And you may be excused, Ms. Saracen. All righty. Plaintiff, calling anyone else?
Your Honor, that concludes the call of our live witnesses. However, we would like to read into evidence a deposition by Jordan Street.
Okay, you may begin.
Just portions of the depositions for ease, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead.
May I publish by way of my co-counsel?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll give her a minute to get set up. Now, turning court and counsel's attention to page 2, line 15 through 16. Question, do you have any children?
I did. My daughter, Rory.
Page 2, lines 23 to 24. Question, what happened to Rory?
She died at soccer practice on September 7th, 2018.
Now moving to page 4, lines 14 through 22. Was soccer something that the two of you shared?
You know, I just played soccer in college, so I already loved the game. But I didn't care what the sport was. I just loved having a kid that was into sports of any kind. I loved getting up on the weekends when she was little to go kick the ball in the backyard and let her try to dribble it past me. I loved talking about games and strategy. It brought back so many memories of my playing days. But this was even better because it was my kid and it made her so happy.
Now moving to page 7, lines 19 through 20. Going on to page 8, line 2. When you were playing soccer at Waco High, did you ever have to run the Burma Road?
Hell yeah, we did. I remember doing that when we were dogging it or if we weren't in the correct position or something. Coach would send us off to run Burma Road. But I'll tell you this, none of my coaches ever made me or any other kid keep going when it was obvious we were exhausted. Discipline is one thing, but that is just dangerous.
And with that, Your Honor, we are done constructively reading in Ms. Jordan Street's testimony. If opposing counsel has anything they'd like to add.
Yes, Your Honor.
Give me 1 second to reset your time. Okay, so you got 30:08 left, Ms. Papantonio. And let's see, we got you back at 39:35 whenever you're ready. Ms. Garcia.
Yes. Turning your attention to page 5, line 12. Did you push Rory to be an athlete?
I don't know if I would use the word push. I encouraged Rory to work hard at sports and at everything else in her life. I taught Rory to never show weakness and to never complain. I wanted her to be tough and to play through the pain, because that is what makes a champion. Rory was tough because I made her tough.
Did you ever hold Rory back in school?
We did, just 1 year. We held her back in the 7th grade so that she could get bigger and faster, which we thought would give her an advantage in high school playing against younger kids. I know it sounds a bit crazy, but it's actually pretty common now. College is expensive, and we wanted to give Rory the best chance we could get at getting a scholarship. Hell, Rory might have been good enough to go pro. I certainly saw that possibility and encouraged Rory to keep that option open.
Now turning your attention to page 6, line 18. Was Rory a discipline problem?
No, not any more than any other kid that age. I mean, she was a little wild and liked to have fun, but she wasn't some hippie smoking dope behind the school or some party animal who stayed out all night. Rory got in trouble a few times, and I got called by the principal a few times, but it was just normal teenager stuff, being late to class, goofing around, or missing some homework assignments. I was confident that she would graduate and go on to college. I know that.
And finally, turning your attention to page 8, line 3. Do you know what a slide tackle is?
Sure.
Are slide tackles part of the game of soccer?
Of course they are. Turn on any game and you're going to see players at every level performing slide tackles. That is part of the deal.
And nothing further from this witness, Your Honor.
All right, 38:01 remaining. Anything further, Ms. Papantonio?
Yes, we would like to publish to the jury 3 exhibits. Exhibit 21.
1 second, let me get your time going again. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead, 30:08.
We offer into evidence Exhibit 21, Exhibit 14, and Exhibit 16, and ask that we publish by way of reading.
Okay, any objection, Ms. Garcia? Okay, they're admitted and you can publish whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor.
Conditions 2:51 p.m., 100 degrees Fahrenheit, scattered clouds, 8 miles per hour winds, 38-degree humidity. 3:51 p.m., 103 degrees Fahrenheit, scattered clouds, 13 miles per hour. Winds, 36% humidity. 4:51 p.m., 104 degrees Fahrenheit, broken clouds, 10 miles per hour winds, 36% humidity. Exhibit 14. From the anatomic and laboratory findings and pertinent history, I ascribe the death to sudden cardiac death. An examination of the deceased's throat was conducted due to the finding of cocaine during the blood draw and toxicology screen. The deceased's throat was not irritated or raw, which would indicate infrequent or first-time use of cocaine, and is not consistent with habitual or repeated use of that drug. An examination of the deceased's brain revealed cerebral edema. Exhibit 16. Here is the opinion that I have reached in this case, based on a reasonable degree of professional and/or medical certainty. Rory Street died as a result of heat exhaustion and/or heat stroke.
And with that, Your Honor, the plaintiff rests her case.
27:53 remaining, and whenever you are ready to begin your case in chief, Ms. Garcia, we can do so. You got 38:01.
Your Honor, at this time, defense would like to move for a directed verdict.
Go ahead, you can be heard on that.
Your Honor, the defense moves for a directed verdict in this case because the plaintiff has failed to meet their burden of proving by a preponderance of the evidence that my client is liable for Rory Street's death. Instead, the only thing that has been shown today is that there was cocaine in Rory's system. And beyond that, their whole case rests on a decades-old workout that has been used time and time again by athletes for 30 years. There's no evidence that this workout in particular caused any other student any distress at any time. Further, there has been no violation of any guidelines by my client. Rory's running of Burma Road was nothing other than an ordinary practice day.
Anything from you, Ms. Papantonio, on that?
Yes, Your Honor. In viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the non-movement, in that case, that would be us. We have absolutely put forth sufficient evidence that a fact finder would find in favor of our case. Now, specifically turning to opposing counsel's argument that this is a decade-old.
Very quickly, please.
Yes, Your Honor, we've put forth sufficient evidence to show that we have met our burden. Coach Taylor put this child through a sliding drill where 15 players attacked her at once. That's enough to show that this is not reasonable for a coach and that it's foreseeable that she would suffer fatal death afterwards. And for that, we ask that you grant. Okay. Deny.
I'm going to go ahead and deny the motion for a directed verdict. Okay. So whenever you're ready to begin your case in chief, Ms. Garcia, you've got 37:10 remaining.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense would like to call Reese Taylor to the stand.
All right, Mr. Taylor, you've been previously sworn, and you can begin whenever you're ready, Ms. Garcia.
Please introduce yourself and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Reese Taylor, Taylor.
Where are you from, Mr. Taylor?
Born and raised here in Waco. Spent my whole life here.
What do you do for a living?
I am a health teacher at Waco High, and I also coach the women's varsity soccer team.
How long have you coached that team?
So I've been at Waco High for about 6 years now.
And in general, how long would you say you've coached soccer?
I've coached soccer for about, I've been coaching in some sport for about 26 years now. I think the soccer is right on 20 years or better now.
And now, do you keep yourself educated on the best practices for coaching soccer?
Yeah, so they offer seminars and training type summits for the coaches for high school athletics generally, and specifically soccer, and I attend those.
And do you incorporate those methods into your actual coaching?
Yeah, of course. You can't incorporate every method they always offer you at every single one of these seminars, but I try to keep myself up to date on all the practices and implementing new techniques or approaches to coaching that I think would be effective to best speak to my team.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about Rory Street now. Did you know Rory?
Of course, she was one of my players, one of my students.
How long had you been her coach?
The entire time she'd been there at Waco High.
Was she a good athlete?
She's a fantastic athlete. Probably the best on the team.
Let's talk about September 7th, 2018 now. Did you have soccer practice that day?
We did.
And what time did that start?
All of our practices started around 3:15, 3:30.
What was on the agenda that day?
I planned a full field scrimmage for that specific day.
Now, when you chose to practice midday, why did you choose that time in particular?
Well, they have classes all throughout the morning, so it's not really an option at the beginning of the day. But also, one of the advantages of practicing in the afternoon is it helps with conditioning players when the games come around and you're doing 45-minute halves, and it's here in Central Texas, it's hot then too, so it's better to practice and get them used to the heat early in the preseason, so that when we actually get to the game time when it matters the most, they'll be in peak physical condition.
Was there any other faculty member present at practice that day?
Yeah, so we always have trainer Jess Merriweather.
So you mentioned there was a scrimmage going on. Is it safe to assume Rory was part of that scrimmage?
Yeah, of course. Rory was on one of the sides, divided teams up in colored jerseys, 11 on each side. She was playing.
And how was she doing during that scrimmage?
Not well. She was out of position a lot, making sloppy passes and missing shots on open goals. Really dogging it that day, and wasn't listening to any criticisms or coaching advice when I spoke to her about her performance.
So what did you do?
After she was brushing off my coaching, my criticism, I had her run the Burma Road.
Can you describe what the Burma Road is for us, please?
Yeah, so the Burma Road is this kind of punishment run that's been around forever. I was running the Burma Road back when I went to Waco High in the 90s. And essentially, it's a 30-yard sprint, get a ball, dribble with it, shoot on an open goal, and then crawl back to start, and then just do it over and over.
How often would you say you'd send players to run Burma Road?
Daily. I mean, it was very common form of punishment. At times, you'd send the whole team to go do the Burma Road if everyone's attitude was poor that day of practice.
During your 6 years at Waco, had there ever been a problem with a player running Burma Road?
I'm not in any of my time as part of the Waco School District. I don't think there's ever been a problem.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about Rory actually running Burma Road that day. Was she the only one running Burma Road, or was there anyone else there?
No, so on that specific day, I believe Aubrey Saracen was running Burma Road as well.
Was she there? Was she already there when you sent Rory?
Yes, so Aubrey was already over there running the Burma Road when I sent Rory over there.
And to your knowledge, was Aubrey having any issues running the Burma Road?
Aubrey, no, I don't think so.
Where were you while those two players were running?
So we've got on one side, we've got the practice field, and then essentially right next to it is where the Burma Road is. And so I was staying on the sideline in between watching the scrimmage play out and making sure they were running Burma Road.
Now, while they were running, what did you notice?
Well, Rory just still seemed to not be putting in 100% effort. She was not sprinting at full speed. Still not. I mean, wasn't making the shots in the open goal. It was a sloppy performance, and I thought she just really still wouldn't take it seriously. Didn't have her heart in it.
Did she ever say that she felt ill at that time?
No, Rory never came to me about anything like that.
Now, typically, if a player does tell you that they feel ill, what would you do?
Send them to the trainer. That's why Jess is there.
Did Jess ever voice any concerns about Burma Road?
About the exercise generally, no. She was never saying anything, I guess being worried about it, nothing like that, no.
Okay, so after you see that Rory is still not giving it her full effort, what do you do?
Well, I wasn't thrilled, so I knew at that point, since no other, I'd already talked to her on the field when we were scrimmaging, sent her to the Burma Road, and it still hadn't changed her attitude. I knew that I had to get through to her some other way, and so I had her come run a slide tackling drill.
What's a slide tackle, Coach Taylor?
So slide tackle is a defensive technique where when one person has the ball and is running towards you, you go in a sliding motion to essentially put your whole body in the way, stop the ball to prevent them from dribbling past you.
And was there a particular reason why you chose a slide tackle that day instead of something else?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, she'd already been running sprints and stuff, and that wasn't getting to her, so I needed something else. And the slide tackling drill gave me the opportunity to, make her the center of attention as one of the leaders and role models on the team, best player. People looked up to her, and the team needed to know that everyone was going to take it. Everyone needed to take practice seriously, even the superstars on the team. And I knew that it would be a challenging activity to get through to her, get her attention, let her know that she's not above the rest of the team.
how many times did this, or how many rounds of this drill were there?
So it went on about 14, 15 people. 14, 15
After any of those rounds, did Rory ever mention feeling ill?
No, Rory never said anything. She never complained, never said that she wasn't feeling well.
Did you ever notice anything different with her?
Not anything out of the ordinary. I mean, it was a challenging drill, but she didn't seem like she was sick or anything.
Was she worn down at all?
Not unreasonably. Like I said, it was intentionally a challenging drill, and she didn't seem any more tired than you'd expect someone having done a challenging drill. She didn't seem ill.
Now, at any point, did anyone tell you that Rory had said she felt sick?
No one had come to me saying that she wasn't feeling well.
At any point after Rory fell to the ground, did anyone tell you that she didn't feel well?
No one came up to me afterwards either to say that she wasn't feeling well.
Now, Coach Taylor, just one final question here. Did you have any knowledge that at the time this was all going on, Rory had cocaine in her system?
No, I had no clue that she consumed cocaine before practice.
No further questions at this time.
$27.10 remaining. You have 27:53, Ms. Papantonio, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes, Your Honor. Coach Taylor, you've got quite the record as a coach.
Thank you.
You got 5 district championships, right?
That's correct.
2 team regional finals.
Yep.
And a team that's even made it all the way to semifinals at state.
It was one of the best teams I've ever coached.
So all that's left on your resume is a state championship, isn't that right?
At Waco High, yeah.
And that's exactly what you were gunning for with your team in the fall of 2018.
That's what I hope for every year that I step on the field.
Right, because that's the role of a coach. You want to win, right?
Yeah, it helps keep the job.
Absolutely. So let's talk about your job as a coach. You take this job seriously.
Yeah, I love soccer.
And when you're not winning games, what you also have to be doing is looking out for your players, right?
Yeah.
Part of your role as coach is keeping them safe.
Absolutely.
And just like you told us on direct, that means you got to keep up to date on the latest information on coaching.
Correct.
You attend coaching clinics several times a year.
That's correct.
Keep yourself up to date on all the newest rules and regulations regarding what it means to be a coach, huh?
All the latest recommendations, yes.
So let's take a look at one of those recommendations. You're familiar with the Texas High School Coaches Association, right?
Yes, I went to one of their conferences recently.
Right, the one in July. June, sorry, a couple months before Rory died, isn't that right?
That's correct.
Okay, let's take a look at what this association had to say. Well, first, let me lay the foundation. Now, you would recognize a PowerPoint that you saw in June, right?
Correct.
Now, take a look at this PowerPoint. Is this the PowerPoint that you saw when you're at the meeting for the Coaches Association in June?
Are you sharing a screen or you want me to look at an exhibit?
Why don't you look at this exhibit right now before we admit it?
Okay, what number is that? Do you mind telling me?
Yeah, give me 1 second. It is exhibit number 11, excuse me.
Okay, I've got it pulled up.
All right, take a look at that. This is the PowerPoint that you viewed at the Coaches Association, isn't that right?
Yes, that's correct.
This PowerPoint is in the same or substantially same condition as the last time you saw it?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time we offer into evidence what's been pre-marked for identification as plaintiff's 11.
Any objection, Ms. Garcia?
Yes, Your Honor. Defense objects on the grounds that this exhibit is hearsay that meets no hearsay exception.
Okay, let's hear that objection.
Yes, Your Honor. We're not offering this for its truth. We're simply offering it for the non-hearsay purposes to show knowledge. Now, this is a PowerPoint that suggests what coaches should be doing with their players. Things like having regular water breaks, things like regulating slide tackling. This just simply goes to show that this coach was put on notice of the regulations within the Texas Coaches Association.
Any response?
Yes, Your Honor. Simply admitting the exhibit to show that this coach was put on notice is still hearsay. Ms. Papatino can question this witness as to his knowledge of these guidelines, but exhibit is hearsay in and of itself.
Okay, explain that to me. I'm not following that aspect of it.
Your Honor, right. Ms. Papatino is saying that she is not admitting this for the truth of the matter, but we believe that she is. She is not admitting it to show that the defendant had knowledge, but she is admitting it to show that these are the guidelines, that this is the truth of what exists for coaches to follow. And for that reason, I would argue that this exhibit is hearsay, but Ms. Papatino is free to question this witness on whether he follows these guidelines or what he knows the guidelines to be.
Okay, so here's how I'm going to rule. I am going to sustain the objection insofar as your line of questioning is going to go into something to the effect of, are these the scientifically correct rules, or are these rules binding on you? However, I will allow you to proceed with questioning as to whether or not he in fact saw this PowerPoint and what the content of that PowerPoint said. If you go any further than that, I encourage you to re-raise the objection, but that's of course a perfectly adequate line of questioning. So overruled to the extent that you're looking to stop the knowledge line of questioning. Oops, sorry, Siri's talking. And so with that, we can get back to it.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Coach Taylor, this is a PowerPoint that was presented at the Coaches Association meeting.
That is correct.
It's a meeting that coaches across the state of Texas go to.
Yes.
And these are recommendations for coaches across the state.
Yes.
What kind of rules they suggest you follow?
Yeah, recommendations.
And so let's talk about these recommendations. I'm on the second page now. And Your Honor, I can't see if this is being shared to
It's not. I mean, if you're share something, there she goes.
There she goes.
Yeah, but it's not up yet. And give her 1 second. It's up now.
All right. Okay, now let's take a look at this. These are what we say regulations, right? Recommendations.
Recommendations, yes.
Okay, and it's talking about practicing in the heat, right?
That's correct.
Something that you're used to doing.
Yes.
It says when temperatures are above 100 degrees, that they recommend that there should be a water break about every 15 minutes, if possible. See that?
Yeah, I see that.
And that's because players, they can overheat, right?
Yes, I think so.
You think players can overheat?
I thought you were asking if that's what PowerPoint said, and that it doesn't say.
I'm simply asking about your knowledge now. You understand that practicing in the heat, it can be dangerous.
Yes, I know that.
People can suffer heat strokes.
Yes.
And you're aware of that.
I'm aware of heat strokes, yes.
Definitely something to look out for in this Texas weather.
Certainly.
Okay, so now that we've taken a look at these recommendations, I want to talk about the conditions that Rory was practicing in that day. No, Rory collapsed about half an hour into practice, isn't that right?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit.
Or an hour and a half, excuse me, I misspoke.
It was a little bit over half an hour. Yeah.
So an hour and a half.
Yeah, well, somewhere in there, I believe.
As you sit here today, you can't tell us if Rory got water every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes.
No, I can't watch all my players the whole time.
You can't tell us if there was a water break for all your players, even after an hour.
You said for all the players, as compared to each player?
I'm asking if your players got a water break on this day.
Oh, yeah, I think they got a break that day.
But you certainly can't tell us that it was a break every 15 minutes.
No.
Certainly can't tell us it was a break every 30 minutes.
No.
Okay, so let's talk about Rory. Rory was one of your star players.
That's true.
She had talent.
Absolutely.
You just even describe her in your own words as superhuman.
Yeah, especially in clutch situations in the games.
Right. One of the best players you've ever coached.
One of, yes.
But on September 7th, something was up with Rory, right?
Yeah, she didn't seem to be taking it seriously.
Well, she was missing passes.
Yes.
She wasn't as quick as usual.
Yes.
Right? Missed a couple of wide open shots.
That's correct.
And what you also have said is that she didn't seem to be understanding your criticism that day.
I don't think it was understanding. I think it was just ignoring.
I'm not asking what you think. I'm asking what you said in the past. And it didn't seem to be understanding your criticism that day. Isn't that correct?
Are you asking if that's what I said?
Yes.
What
we can agree on, coach, is that this was unusual, right?
Yeah.
Something seemed different with Rory that day.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And that upsets you a little bit.
Yeah, it's frustrating when players don't listen.
Caused you to heat up. But even after seeing the mistakes she was making, you didn't call her over to ask if everything was okay.
No.
No, instead you sent her to the Burma Road. Isn't that right?
I did, yeah.
In your words, you wanted to teach her a lesson.
Yep.
And the way you taught your best player a lesson is by making her run 30 yards.
Yes.
Dribble another 30 yards.
Correct.
And then bear crawl 60 yards back to the start.
That's correct.
120 yards total.
Yep.
And then if you wanted to them to do it again, they did it again, right?
Correct.
All up until you saw fit.
That's correct.
And as you sit here today, you can't tell us if Rory ran one Burma Road.
No.
Or if she ran 3 Burma Roads.
Yeah, I don't know how many she ran.
Great, that's because you weren't watching.
Yep.
You weren't counting.
I wasn't counting, no.
But you do know that Rory came directly from that Burma Road over to do this new drill, right?
That's correct.
And that was the slide tackling drill.
Yes.
And you wanted Rory to do the slide tackling drill because she still wasn't following your rules, right?
Yeah, she wasn't giving it her all.
Right. She was slower than usual.
Yes.
So you brought her over to this new drill for her own good, is what you've said.
Yeah.
Okay, now before we talk about the nature of this drill, I want to touch back on that presentation that you sat in on, because that presentation, it also talked about slide tackling, isn't that right?
It did.
And in your words, slide tackles, they're hard tackles.
I believe I said it was a challenging drill.
Well, what you've said in the past is that slide tackles are hard tackles.
Oh, yeah.
Right, that they've got a lot of physical contact.
They can, yeah.
And you wanted to make sure that Rory got the point.
Yes.
So you lined up each player.
That's correct.
And one by one told them to slide tackle Rory.
That's correct.
And one by one, players knocked her to the ground.
Yes.
Up to 15 times, isn't that right?
That's correct.
So based on what you saw, Rory's body hit the ground up to 15 times.
Yeah.
In fact, knocked her so hard once that you actually had to physically grab her by the jersey to lift her back up.
Yeah, I helped her up.
But coach, at that point, you didn't say, okay, Rory, we've had enough, right?
No.
At that point, you didn't say, you seem to struggle a bit on that last one. Are you okay?
No, I did not.
No, at that point, when you had to physically lift Rory back up, you pointed at the next player and said, go ahead and slide tackle her. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I had her continue the drill.
And on that last time, that 15th time, she didn't get back up, did she?
She didn't.
No further questions?
$18.04 remaining. Any redirect, Ms. Garcia?
Yes, briefly, Your Honor.
1 second to reset your clock. We've got 27:10 left. Okay, whenever you're ready.
Coach Taylor, was there water available at practice that day?
There was.
Was water usually available to your players?
Yes.
If Rory wanted to go get water, would she have been free to go get water?
Yes.
Would that be the same for all of your players?
Absolutely.
Now, earlier you testified that there was a trainer on the field that day. Did Miss Merriweather ever voice any concern about what was going on with Rory?
No, she never did.
Did she ever tell you that Rory looked like she needed medical attention?
No, never said anything to me about Rory.
Now, why is it that you were upset that Rory wasn't following instructions?
Like I said, I mean, she's a super talented player. I knew what she's capable of, and she was a role model and a leader on the team. People looked up to her and would often follow in her footsteps. And so, it's important that the leaders, the best players on the team, are giving it their all and being receptive to feedback.
Did you make her partake in any of these drills because you were angry at her?
No.
And there's been some talk about the fact that this drill went on for 15 times. Why did you keep blowing the whistle after each round?
She kept getting back up, and it was just to get through that she's not above the team.
At any time after she fell down, any of those points, did she look any different than any of the other players?
Not that I remember. No.
Was she sweating any more than any of the players?
I think everybody was sweating pretty badly that day.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, anything further, or can this witness be excused?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Witness may be excused.
Thank you, Coach Taylor. All right, Ms. Garcia, you've got 24:57 remaining. Plaintiff, you've got 18:04 remaining. Anything further for your case in chief, Ms. Garcia?
That concludes our live witnesses, Your Honor, but at this time we would like to read in parts of Jess Merriweather's testimony by deposition.
All right, let's get that underway.
If my second chair could join us to read Jess Merriweather's deposition.
You can begin.
Actually, sorry, give me one moment. I just need to get that up. Okay.
Turning your attention to page 1, line 6. Good morning. Would you please state your name for the record?
Hello there. My name is Jess Merriweather.
How old are you, Jess?
I'm 28 years old.
Where do you live?
I live in Waco, Texas.
How long have you lived in Waco?
Just a couple of years now. I grew up in Houston, then I went to Texas A&M for undergrad, and then I got a master's degree in sports training from A&M as well. After that, I worked for a couple of years at another high school in College Station before I got the job at Waco High.
And what's your job at Waco High?
I am an athletic trainer, and I also teach health.
What's the job of an athletic trainer at a high school?
We have various teams and activities at the school that involve some level of physical activity and competition, everything from football to soccer to volleyball to cheerleading and drill team. As a trainer, I work with the students that participate in those activities to keep them healthy and in shape and to treat any injuries that they have.
Do you attend practices?
Yes, depending on what time of year it is, it may be football or soccer or something else, but there's always a trainer at any official practice for our various athletic teams.
How long have you been an athletic trainer?
About 2 years now.
Turning your attention to line 24 on page 3. Are you familiar with Coach Riley Taylor?
I am.
On page 4, line 18. Do you know who Rory Street was?
Yeah, I knew Rory. Very sad what happened.
Now turning your attention to page 8, line 8. Were you at practice the day Rory died?
I was.
Did you see Rory running Burma Road?
I saw Rory over on Burma Road, but I wasn't watching her closely.
Did you see Rory during the slide tackling drill?
Again, I saw that it was happening, and I certainly saw parts of it, but I didn't watch it closely.
What were you doing while all of this was going on?
I was taping another student's ankle about 40 yards away.
At any time, did you see Rory stumbling, faltering, or slowing down in any way that would have indicated she was in trouble?
No, not at all.
Was Rory sweating hard?
I mean, yes, but everyone was, including me. It was a really hot day.
Now on page 9, line 1. Did Rory ever say anything to you about feeling bad that day?
Nope, never said anything to me. And here's the thing, I'm there to take care of those players and they know it. I'm kind of a combination trainer and guardian to the team. So they trust me and I trust them to tell me if something is wrong or if they're hurting. Rory didn't say a word, and she would have. She was a tough kid, but she knew her limits and would have let me or coach know when she needed water.
Are players allowed to get water when they want it?
Yes, all they have to do is ask, even if we're not on a water break.
Based on your knowledge and experience in the field of physical education and sports training, do you think that Coach Taylor's means of disciplining Rory Street on the day in question were reasonable or appropriate?
I don't think they were unusual at all. Coach Taylor is a winning coach that pushes players, but Coach Taylor is also concerned about player safety. We talk about it all the time. So I would term Coach Taylor's conduct and approach to discipline as orthodox in every sense of the word.
Nothing further from this witness, Your Honor.
Anything else for your case in chief, Ms. Garcia, or are you resting?
The defense rests.
So 21:34 remaining. We are now ready to begin with the closings, unless you have anything on rebuttal, Ms. Papatonio, but I don't think you do.
Oh, nothing for a rebuttal, Your Honor. However, we do request just a brief recess to gather our thoughts before closing.
Sure.
If that's permitted.
Just keep it to 2 minutes very quickly. Scoring judges, if any of you need to use the bathroom in that time, if you can turn your camera back on. That way I can see that you're gone and then I can see when you return. Okay, 2 minutes.
Your Honor, while we're in recess, can I just reserve any remaining time for rebuttal?
Absolutely. All right, it looks like we lost a scoring judge, so everybody hang tight. Scoring judge left the meeting. Let me figure out who it is. She's back. Miss Warren, you with us? Kelsey Warren, can you hear me? Are you there?
Yes, I can. I apologize. It made me rejoin.
Hey, no problem. Just let us know if you've got Kathy's cell if you need to call up here. If you can't get back on, let us know, okay?
I think we're good. Thank you.
Good deal. Thank you, Ms. Warren. All right, counsel, are we ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Garcia, you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, let me get stopwatch set up. Okay, did we just lose someone else again? No. 1 second, let me get the stopwatch set up. You've got 18:04 for closing. I will, like I said, I'll give you hand signals at 10 on each minute, and then I'll give you the half-minute marker, and I'll cut you off when you go under, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, whenever you're ready to start.
May it please the court, counsel, Your Honor. At the beginning of this trial, I told you that it didn't have to be this way. And now you've seen through the evidence and through the testimony, and you know what I told you was right. It didn't have to be this way. See, the conditions, the contact, the lack of care, change any one of those things, and it's likely that Rory would be here in this Zoom meeting with us rather than the subject of it. See, the moment we entered this courtroom, we understood that we have a burden to prove that the defendant is responsible for Rory's death based on the preponderance of the evidence. And we've absolutely met that burden. Because you saw here today that this defendant, that he controlled those conditions. He controlled the wave after the wave of contact that Rory suffered. And he alone is responsible for his own lack of care for his star athlete. See, he broke a young woman, and we're left to just pick up those pieces. And that's why you're here, Your Honor. See, by this point, it should be clear to you that the facts, the law, that it demands that this defendant be held liable. And that's exactly what we're asking you to do. But before we do that, we've got to walk through the evidence. And we've got to see how exactly we've met this burden. And we've got to show you the truth. See, the first thing we had to show you is that the defendant failed to act within reasonable care. And what that means, what you have to ask yourself, is how would a reasonable coach act? What would he have done in a similar situation? And we've absolutely shown that he didn't act with reasonable care. See, to prove that he didn't, we brought you eyewitnesses. Aubrey Saracen. And see, Aubrey was Rory's best friend. You learned that they had known each other since they were little, that they had played soccer together for years. She was always right by Rory's side while they ran Burma Road on that scorching day, and when Rory took a last breath. See, what did we hear about Burma Road? We heard that it's tradition, but no one said that anyone ran it like Coach Taylor made them run it until they were sick, to run it until they passed out. Now, the defense has made a big deal about this Burma Road, saying that it's just an ordinary part of the school tradition, saying that it didn't contribute to Rory's death in any way. But think about that. They forced children to run 60 feet and then crawl back on their hands and knees over and over and over again until Coach saw fit. You see, that day, Aubrey saw her friend struggling. Those same words were used by Coach Taylor. Rory was pale, breathing heavy, not herself. So when Aubrey asked, "What's the matter?" Rory responded, "I feel funny. My chest hurts." But before she could so much as help, Coach Taylor's demands came ringing through, demanding that Rory come back for physical torture in a brand new drill that they had never even done before, the slide tackle. See, that slide tackle, the very name of it, is what was done. They tackled Rory. And slide tackling is normal in a soccer game, that's true. Being knocked to the ground happens once or twice a game. But being knocked to the ground, wave after wave, in a punishing way, that's not normal. That's not reasonable. See, no one took the stand here today and said that was. Not even Coach Taylor. See, Coach Taylor saw that Rory was struggling, but he didn't do anything to help. He saw that Rory had fallen to the ground, but instead of saying, "Hey, I think you might have had enough," or "Hey, maybe you should get a sip of water," what did he do? He yanked her up by her jersey to teach her a lesson, made her stand back up and do it all over again. You see, his anger at what he perceived to be goofing off blinded him to what was actually in front of him, a young girl in trouble. See, the color of this girl's face, it was vanishing. Her hands were on her hips because she could barely breathe. And the anger may have sent just a wave after a wave of players to punish this girl who was suffering a heat stroke in front of his very eyes. But to him, no, that wasn't a heat stroke. She was just dodging it. She was just messing around. Now, Coach Taylor had the audacity to say that this was discipline, that this was reasonable, and that by no means does a reasonable coach demand that a child continuously run in 105-degree weather with no breaks. Does a reasonable coach tell a young lady that he's going to force her to run until he passes out? Does a reasonable coach tell her teammate to slam into her over and over and over again to teach a lesson? Absolutely not. There's nothing reasonable about what was happening on that day. You see, Your Honor, because Coach Taylor is not a Navy SEAL. He's not training people to go into battle. He's training high school girls to play soccer. See, it's one thing to push our team to be better. I understand that. Mentors do that. But Coach Taylor wasn't her mentor. He was her tormentor. He wasn't helping these girls be better at soccer. He was treating them as if they've signed up for the Navy SEAL training and that this was their hell week, forcing them to endlessly crawl the length of a football field after football field on their hands and knees, tackling each other, not allowing them to take breaks, belittling them if they showed any signs of weakness. So how can you blame Rory for not speaking up? See, this is a man who should have lifted these girls up, encouraged them. Instead, Coach Taylor lifted Rory up. But this type of lifting her up was from the ground at which she was struggling on, lifting her up by her jersey to do it one more time. See, Coach Taylor actively placed this young woman in harm's way. Damn the consequences. That, Your Honor, that is a deviation from the standard of care. You see, the thing about this case is that Coach Taylor, he knew better. He even told you. You know, we took a look at the clinics that he went to, the PowerPoints that came from that clinics, and the things we learned. You saw those slides, how they talked about suggestions for what to do in 100-degree heat. You saw the slides that say they always need access to water, that there should be breaks every 15 minutes. And even if Coach hadn't have done any of that, even if that wasn't obvious to him at the time of practice, what should have been obvious to him, what was happening right in front of his eyes, a player like Rory struggling in this heat. He could have asked, hey, do you need a sip of water? He could have asked, hey, do you need a break? He could have said, don't worry about it today, come back to practice and we'll get better at this. See, there's no evidence to suggest that this discipline, these techniques that Coach used to make these players stronger was reasonable. So don't let Coach Taylor sit here and say that he follows the standards of care when he absolutely didn't, because no one here says that's correct. But that's not all we've shown you here today. See, the evidence has made it clear that the death of young Rory was a foreseeable outcome of Coach Taylor's actions. The conditions, the contact, the lack of care made everything here foreseeable. So was it reasonably foreseeable that a young person could have a heat stroke in 105-degree weather while sprinting across the length of a football field and crawling back on their hands and knees? Of course it was foreseeable. Was it foreseeable to force a child to go without water for hours in the midst of this heat? That a tragedy would result for that. Is that foreseeable? Absolutely. Was it foreseeable that forcing a collapsing student to go over and over and over again, to be tackled over and over and over again, that her body would eventually shut down? Is that foreseeable? Absolutely. See, even if your own common sense doesn't say it, well, our expert did. See, we weren't able to bring him here today because of this coronavirus and because of the limited access we have in these Zoom court platforms. But we were able to show you the expert report. And you're going to get the opportunity to go back and look at that and study it carefully, because what you'll see is a medical doctor with over 30 years of experience telling you the symptoms of a heat stroke: unusual paleness, struggle, convulsions, lifelessness. See, not only does a heat stroke cause that, it causes the muscles to break down, for fluid to flood the brain. It causes cardiac arrest. All of that was happening in Rory's body, and all of it was visible to the people around her. You know, but the defense, that what they've said is just, wait, hold on. This kid was doing cocaine. She essentially did it to herself. They're pointing the finger at a 17-year-old child, and how dare they? You see, this teenager, she was under a lot of pressure, and she acted out once, only once. How can you blame her? How can you blame her when you have the weight of Coach Taylor every practice of every day? How can you blame her when she's constantly looking for scholarships to maintain her grades? So that's not what caused the issue here today, because the only medical doctor in this case is going to tell you that the cocaine, it was nominal. And what that means is that it was small, that it couldn't have resulted in her death or of the heat exhaustion. See, the defense, they also brought a burden here today when they decided to point the finger at Rory. And that burden was to prove that Rory's responsible for her own death. And I need you to break down what that means. You see, after Coach Taylor was pointing the finger at player after player, instructing them to tackle, now he's pointing a finger at a dead child and saying it's your fault. But he can't even tell you how much cocaine was in her system. But what we do know, the only thing that we know, is that it's small. And that wasn't cause of the death, and that it wasn't the cause of her death. See, after you've heard all this testimony, evidence, when you see the evidence for yourself and you read through these reports, you'll see that it did not have to be this way, not even close. But it was this way because of the conditions that Coach Taylor put these students in, put Rory in. The contact that he forced Rory to endure at time after time again. And the lack of care he showed for a girl who was struggling. So at the end of this trial, we ask to use your common sense, to look at the evidence. And when you do that, you'll find that there's only one answer in this case. And that's the answer that he has to be liable. He's liable for Rory's death. Thank you.
.533 remaining. Ms. Garcia, let me get your clock set. You have 21:34, and then we'll get rolling. Okay, same thing, Ms. Garcia. I'll give you hand signals just like I did this last one. Whenever you're ready, we can get started.
The Texas summer heat has been forging athletes across multiple sports for generations. It's true everywhere from Houston to Dallas, College Station to El Paso, and it's true here in Waco. And across the state, coaches and educators do their very best to encourage and coax the best performances out of these athletes. And in return, the athletes give their best effort to remain healthy, to remain ready to play, and to give their all every single day, whether in practice or game. What those athletes don't do is ingest harmful substances that impair their performance, their concentration, or even their lives. Unfortunately, Rory Street was one of those athletes. Gifted though she was, Rory Street chose to ingest cocaine before a soccer practice under the hot summer sun, and her tragic death ended up following. But today, plaintiff seeks to hold my client liable, a career educator whose life's mission is to work with and motivate young people. And as the evidence today demonstrated, that result cannot stand. Your Honor, the plaintiff has the burden of proving by preponderance of the evidence that Mr. Taylor's actions caused Rory Street's death. However, the defendants raised the affirmative defense of contributory negligence, and we bear the burden of proving by a preponderance of the evidence that Rory Street's actions caused her own death. Specifically, the verdict forms in this case raise two questions, both of which we have answered. First, did the negligence of Rory Street proximately cause the accident in question? And if so, second, what percentage of the blame does Rory Street bear? Your Honor, the evidence today has shown not only that the plaintiff failed to meet its burden of proving that Reese Taylor proximately caused Rory Street's death, but that Rory Street herself proximately caused this accident and bears 100% of the blame. To demonstrate Rory Street's negligence, we had to show that she failed to do what a reasonable person of ordinary prudence would have done in similar circumstances. Consider this: a high school soccer player, one of ordinary prudence before practice. They're under the hot summer sun. That person would rest. They would mentally prepare. They'd make sure that they were properly hydrated and fueled before practice. What that person wouldn't do is ingest cocaine, which is exactly what Rory did. Coach Taylor, on the other hand, followed standard guidelines for practices. And neither Burma Road nor the slide tackling drill that's been talked about contributed to Rory Street's death. Now, as you've seen, Coach Taylor is a career educator and coach who cares for each of his players like they're his own children. Yes, he pushes his players hard. He pushes them and he makes them run Burma Road. But he does that to motivate his players so that they can reach their full potential. He keeps himself up to date about coach responsibilities, and as I'll demonstrate next, he followed the Texas High School Coaches Association's guidelines to a T. First, Coach Taylor had water available for his players on September 7th, 2018. You heard that from Aubrey Saracen herself. Second, Ms. Saracen testified that Coach Taylor often gave breaks during practice, usually at least one, but she can't remember if any breaks were given on September 7th, 2018. You also heard Ms. Saracen tell you that practice started around 3:15, and by the time she was running Burma Road, it was pretty far into practice at 4:30, which meant practice was almost over in those 2 hours that are allotted in 100-degree heat. Lastly, shade is only required if it's possible. And as you've seen, shade wasn't possible on that field, Your Honor. Next, Burma Road didn't cause Rory Street's death. Running Burma Road is a tradition in Waco, one that's lasted decades under coaches before Coach Taylor. Rory Street's father ran it himself for the same reasons that Rory had to run it on that day. Coach Taylor himself ran this same Burma Road when he was a student at Waco High back in the 90s. Other players run it. Coach Taylor's own daughter runs it. The plaintiff's main witness, Ms. Saracen, was running it that day, and she had no problems. No dehydration, no heat exhaustion. She wasn't pale. Now, Rory's running of Burma Road was not beyond ordinary or expected, or beyond what similarly situated individuals had to do that day. Rory wasn't sweating any more than anyone else that day. She never said a word to Coach Taylor about her condition. Coach Taylor himself never noticed anything related to physical exhaustion. Only thing he noticed was inaccuracy in her game. The slide tackling drill wasn't a cause either. Yes, Rory was struggling, but that was the point of the drill. Coach Taylor never saw her struggling in terms of needing medical attention. He saw her struggling in terms of the game. Ms. Saracen told you that when Rory finally did collapse, it was out of nowhere. Rory never once mentioned that she was having these issues because she didn't want to disclose the real issue. She had ingested cocaine. Rory was under a lot of pressure. You heard Mr. Street say that he wanted his daughter to be a soccer star, and Rory wasn't able to handle it. So sometime shortly before practice on September 7th, 2018, Rory Street ingested cocaine. Now, as our expert toxicologist Spencer London notes in his expert report, which has already been admitted, Your Honor, 60 nanograms of cocaine were found in Miss Street's blood. But this might not indicate the amount of cocaine that was in her blood at the time of her death. And how do we know that Rory ingested cocaine before practice? Look no further than her actions themselves. When someone ingests drugs before practice for a sport that involves a lot of coordination, skilled movement, performance level is going to be affected. And those same erratic actions like errant shots on goal or missing easy passes, being out of position, that's how we know that Rory ingested cocaine before practice. We know that those errant passes and those missed shots weren't due to running Burma Road. And we know that because Miss Saracen herself admitted that she didn't notice Rory's pale skin or her chest pains until after they ran Burma Road, after Rory had already made those errant passes. Coach Taylor had no way of knowing that Rory ingested a harmful substance that day. A harmful substance that made it easier for her to get heat exhaustion on that hot, scorching summer day. And Rory certainly didn't want Coach Taylor or anyone else to know what she had done. You also heard from Jess Merriweather, the trainer at Waco High School, and she told you that Coach Taylor's approach to discipline and practice was orthodox in every sense of the word. The team mom herself told you that there was nothing unreasonable with Coach Taylor's tactics on that day. Finally, the plaintiff wants you to believe that Miss Saracen is telling you the truth, but Miss Saracen has a personal vendetta against Coach Taylor. She was replaced by Coach Taylor's own daughter, and you heard that made Miss Saracen upset. Plaintiff's other witness, Mr. Street, he's simply trying to live vicariously through his daughter, and he pushed his daughter to her limits, pushed her to use cocaine. He himself is actually a proponent of the Burma Road treatment. Ultimately, Your Honor, what happened in this case was a tragedy. A young life was ended far too early. But the evidence showed today that my client, Reese Taylor, had no part in this result. After reviewing all of the evidence, we ask that you find the only verdict that the evidence supports, that my client, Reese Taylor, is not liable for Rory Street's death, and that Rory Street's death was caused entirely by her own actions. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Papantonio, you've got 5 minutes and 33 seconds left, okay? Whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Motivates, inspires, mentors these girls, cares for these girls, treats these girls like they're his own children. See, these are a lot of the distracting words that opposing counsel just tried to flash in your face, tried to use to blind you from what is really happening. Because you don't motivate someone by making them crawl on their hands and knees for the length of a football field over and over again. Nothing inspires a girl like being yelled at, being told that she has to run until she passes out, that she's worthless. You don't put someone you care for into a lineup to be tackled by 15 different people. And you don't allow your child to be knocked to the ground over and over and over again. Because members of the jury, in any day and age, if we did that to our child, well, that'd be child abuse. But these are the things that this coach did to Rory on this day. And these are the things that opposing counsel continues to ignore for one minor detail, one nominal amount of cocaine. You see, they are taking nearly a grain, a small pinch of cocaine, and they're trying to blow it up and make it this entire case, but don't let them do it. Because you've seen how Coach Taylor treated these girls. You see, a reasonable coach doesn't point the finger at players, doesn't call them names, doesn't point the finger to have them, tackled to the ground. Nothing about Coach Taylor's conduct was reasonable. When you go back into the jury room, tell him that conduct like this is not okay. Tell him that conduct like this will result in fatal harm to people. We ask that you find Coach Taylor liable, because he's absolutely liable.
Alrighty, scoring judges, if you can go ahead and submit your scores. Everybody just hang out in the room until I get word that those scores have been tabulated. I'm going to step off camera just very briefly, but I will be right back.